Well, hello, guys. We're on day 4 of our reading ELA this week. We're going to read our story again today. But before we get into that, I want to look at a couple things. We've been working with suffixes this week in spelling. You've got your ed and ing suffixes on your spelling words. And I want to look at a little chart here. Here's some more suffixes that can be added to the end of words. That is ity and ty. So let's read about these. A suffix is a word part added to the end of a base word that changes the meaning of the word. A suffix also changes the word's parts of speech. For instance, when you add the suffix ity to the adjective popular, you get the noun popularity. So here's some examples. If you want to run for class president, it helps to be popular. The book's popularity made me want to read it even more. So here we have some more words that you might add ity to. Secure would become security. It's somebody who makes sure that you're secure. Rare would be rarity, would be something that's very rare. Final would be finality, which means it's the end of something. We can add ty to the end of words like safe, would be safety. Certain would be certainty, and subtle would be subtlety. So ity and ty also suffixes that you could add to the end of word to change their meaning. Okay, let's take a look now at this text structure. We've talked about this several times. I know there was a question on the last benchmark about text structure. And so this text structure is the way a story is structured, or the way a story is built. An author builds a story a certain way to make the story flow like he or she wants it to flow. Some authors might write a story with comparison and contrast. They're telling how people or things are different and how they're alike. And the purpose would be to describe how things are different and alike. Transition words would be but, both, however, and. Can you think of a story that might be comparing, contrasting? Off the top of your head, maybe you took 2 trips, and one trip you took to the beach, another trip you took to the zoo. You could write a story about how they were alike, how your trips were alike, and how they were different. You could compare and contrast trips that way. Cause and effect, you know what that is. It explains what happened and why it happens. An author or a story could be set up with a cause and effect structure. Because this happened, here's what happens. We did that kind of at the beginning of the year. If you think about, it was the first 9 weeks when we talked about an event in our life that changed us or made us grow because this event happened in your life. The effect of it has changed you in some way. Okay. Sequence, which is our story this week, is in a sequence order. It's first this happened, then this happened. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of dates in our story this week, dates that tell in 1962, they wrote the song Love Me Do, and then 1964, this song was popular. So it's first, next, last. It explains events in order. They've got a lot of transition words and sequencing stories: before, next, first, then, last, and after. And then some stories are written problem and solution. Here's the problem. What's the solution going to be? So you could find stories that start off with a problem, and then you're really interested as you read to figure out how the story's going to end and what the solution to the problem is going to be. The purpose is to show a problem and how it's solved. Transition words: problem, solution, difficulty. The answer is. So stories can be written in one of these structures for different purposes. Okay. Now let's look at our vocabulary again. Remember, you'll have a test on this vocabulary tomorrow, so make sure you know these words. Our first word is dignified. And here's a soldier. He looks very dignified, doesn't he? He acts in a way that's formal, calm, and proper. Soldiers are trained to act and behave in certain ways, especially when they're standing at attention or when they're being saluted or they got to salute somebody. They have to act very dignified. Our next word is stunned. Look at these guys right here. They must be watching a scary movie. They look stunned by something, or surprised, or shocked, or amazed by something. Either that or popcorn's really hot one. I think it's more likely they're stunned. Okay. Polished. We got an ice skater there. An ice skater maybe at the Olympics would have to give a very polished performance, given with great skill and no mistakes to try to win a gold medal maybe. Polished. Next word is regretted. Oh, that cracks me up. I just saw this for the first time. Regretted. Here's a dog. It looks like he chewed up his toy and chewed through a teddy bear. If you regret something, you feel sorry about it and wish you hadn't done it. That dog's like, oh boy, now they're going to put me outside for the rest of the day. I'm in trouble now. And he's going to regret something. Hilarious. That doggy looked hilarious to me. Hilarious is something that's very funny. Makes you laugh. Observant. If you're observant, you see or notice more details than other people. Maybe this grandmother is teaching her granddaughter to look for certain patterns when she's making a quilt or something. She's being very observant, teaching her to be observant. Flattered. She gave her dad a card for Father's Day. He feels flattered. If you're flattered by something, it made you feel honored or special. And trampled. If something's trampled, it's stepped on or damaged or crushed. Look, somebody stepped all over those beautiful flowers. They trampled them and crushed them. That wasn't very nice, was it? All right, so let's get into our story. Let's read it one more time together. Today, the Beatles were fab and they were funny. We're starting on page 319 in your reading book. So get your reading book out, open it up, and read along with me. The Beatles were fab and they were funny. Music was everywhere in Liverpool, where John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr grew up. Life wasn't easy in that scruffy city in northern England in the 1940s and 50s, but music made things better. John played guitar and harmonica. Paul started out playing trumpet, but traded it for guitar. George had a guitar too and could play circles around John and Paul. Ringo was the best drummer in Liverpool. From time to time, they got together as lads until they became superstars. The Fab Four made music, made history, and made people laugh. John, Paul, George, and Ringo always had fun together, even when they were trying to name their band. Here's some of those names there. In the early days, the Beatles performed hours and hours in hundreds and hundreds of shows around England and Germany. It was exhausting and paid next to nothing. Anxious to have a record of their very own, the Beatles were afraid the band was going nowhere. They used silliness to help keep their spirits up. John would shout, "Where are we going, lads?" "To the top, Johnny." "And where is that?" "The toppermost of the poppermost," the others would yell, and they went on with the show. I like to make people laugh. When they got a new producer in 1962, the Beatles tried hard to make a good impression, but it wasn't easy. During a recording session, the producer listed the many things he didn't like about the music, then said politely, "Let me know if there's anything you don't like." The painful silence. George tried to lighten the mood. "Well, for a start, I don't like your tie." The producer laughed, but he still had the Beatles sing their song 17 times in a row. It was midnight before he thought it sounded right. The lads had their first record, "Love Me Do," and a song Paul had written 4 years earlier when he was 16. Once the bouncy tune got on the radio, people started listening. Months later, the Beatles' second record, "Please Please Me," hit #1 on the charts in England. The band began appearing on English TV, singing, joking, and shaking their mop-top hair and having a blast. The songs were fantastic, but the lads themselves were so cool, so funny, so fab, short for fabulous, that reporters started calling them the Fab Four. The first Beatles fan club started with 35 members and grew to 40,000 within a year. Fans sent their heroes love letters, stuffed animals, and their favorite English candy, squishy jelly babies. It was the birth of something new, Beatlemania. No one had seen or heard a band quite like the Beatles before. Fans followed them everywhere. The lads became clever at escaping crowds, although sometimes they needed help. Once a police officer slung Ringo over his shoulder to get him to safety. The fans wanted more, so John and Paul wrote songs as fast as they could, meeting over tea and cornflakes. As certain words popped up in hit after hit, they began to consider them lucky. Me, please, love, and especially you. When Paul wrote "She Loves You," Paul's father begged him to change its yeah, yeah, yeah line to a more proper yes, yes, yes. But Paul laughed the idea off with a no, no, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah was soon heard around the world, and She Loves You became the first Beatles record to sell 1 million copies. The Beatles were no longer playing in small, seedy clubs. They were even invited to perform for a formal audience that included the British royal family. How should they act? Could the Fab Four still be silly in front of royalty? Before Twist and Shout, their final song, John invited the main floor audience to clap along. Then he peered up at the dignified royal family in the box seats. And the rest of you, if you just rattle your jewelry. Everyone giggled, even the Queen Mother. Fame came upon them so quickly that the Beatles still couldn't believe it when they heard themselves on the radio. Whenever a Beatles song was scheduled to air, they would stop whatever they were doing, even driving, and listen to the radio with delight. One night in 1964, their manager burst into their hotel rooms at 3 a.m., waving a telegram from New York in their sleepy faces. Their newest song, I Want to Hold Your Hand, had hit #1 in America. The lads stayed awake for hours, stunned that Beatlemania had crossed the Atlantic Ocean. But John still had to joke. He liked to call the song, I Want to Hold Your Nose. The next month, the Fab Four flew to New York, arriving at John F. Kennedy Airport to the sound of 3,000 fans singing, We love you, Beatles, oh yes we do. 2 days after crossing the Atlantic, they made their first American TV appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. By then, the Beatles had played together more than 1,000 times. Their performance was as polished as could be, and this turned out to be the most watched TV show in history. Even when the massive audiences in America made them nervous, the Beatles didn't show it. All the screaming of the fans was music to their ears, a sign that everyone was having a good time. George said, We like screams, so scream louder and louder. They were now big stars riding around together in limousines, yet the Beatles had as much silly fun as they'd had in Liverpool as boys. Paul said, There were just 4 of us in the back of that car, laughing hysterically. Laughter was their way of dealing with their sudden fame. They joked about everything, but they soon regretted joking about their favorite candy. Soft English jelly babies couldn't be bought in America, so fans started stocking up on jelly beans. They threw jelly beans at the stage during concerts as a way to show their love. Ouch! Jelly beans were much harder than squishy jelly babies. John had an idea. Just eat them. The Beatlemania roller coaster reached dizzying heights during the 1964 tour. Fans screamed in the Hollywood Bowl, an outdoor stage under the stars. In Denver's Red Rocks Amphitheater, the music echoed off cliffs of red and orange. In Philadelphia's Convention Hall, in a city filled with history. At the Indiana State Fair, amid the sound and smell of farm animals. And in 19 more cities from San Francisco to New York. Beatlemania was so intense that the screaming of the fans often drowned out the songs. The lads found it hilarious that the less their music could be heard, the more popular they became, and the more money they were paid. Anything they touched went on sale to fans. Even the hotel sheets they slept on were cut into tiny squares and sold as souvenirs. Excited fans didn't just miss hearing the music. Sometimes people were so starstruck they didn't hear anything the Beatles said at all. John once tested this by telling a distracted restaurant waiter, I'd like a steak, medium. And 2 elephants came, and a police officer bit my head off. And a cup of tea, please. Reporters interviewed the band constantly. The Fab Four often thought the questions were silly, and they loved to give silly answers. Everyone has a favorite Beatle. John was often called the smart one. Question, which one are you, John? Eric. Question, some people think your haircuts are un-American. John said, well, it was very observant of them, because we aren't American, actually. Question, how do you find all of this business of having screaming girls following you all over the place? George, well, we feel flattered. John, and flattened. Do you go to the barber at all? Paul, just to keep it trimmed, but sometimes we do it ourselves, you know. John, with our feet. Baby-faced Paul was the cute Beatle. What's your favorite sport? Paul says, sleeping. Is your hair real? Paul says, is yours? Question, you Beatles have conquered 5 continents. What do you want to do next? Paul said, conquer 6. Question, will you ever stop being Beatles? Paul said, we are the Beatles. That's what we are. Younger and a bit shyer, George was sometimes the quiet Beatle. Question, what do you call your hairstyle? George said, Arthur. What do you do when you're cooped up in a hotel room? George said, we ice skate. If one of you stopped being a Beatle, what do you think you'd do? George said, I think I'd train elephants at the zoo. What do you do with all the money that you make? George said, I'm going to change all mine into cents and fill up a room and dive into it. Nothing rattled Ringo, even rude questions about his large nose. What do you think of Beethoven? Great, especially his poems. How many of you are bald that you have to wear those wigs? All of us. How do you find America? We went to Greenland and made a left turn. The Beatles' 1965 American tour opened with the biggest live concert in history so far. A happy crowd of 55,600 fans welcomed them to Shea Stadium in New York. The band's helicopter landed nearby as they watched thousands of flashbulbs light up the sky. This was surely the toppermost. And yet, with a wall of screams, nothing else could be heard, not the music, and not even the jets taking off from 2 nearby airports. This struck the Beatles as so ridiculous that they could do nothing but laugh. But they soon stopped joking, worried about the crowd getting out of control. Later, a reporter asked, where would you like to go that you haven't gone yet? John said, home. 4 years after Love Me Do, the Beatlemania had driven fans wild all over the world, but the Fab Four were forgetting how to laugh. Concerts had bigger problems than jelly beans flying through the air. Now the lads were in danger of being trampled by exciting fans. At the same time, as they wrote songs that dug deeper into the meaning of life and love, their meaning was becoming too complicated to perform live. During their last major concert at Candlestick Park in San Francisco, the fans huddled together on a chilly night. No one quite realized it, but Beatlemania was coming to an end. But it was far from the end of the Beatles and their fun-filled romp. The band retreated to the recording studio where they could hear the music again and continue to make each other laugh. Nothing was quite the same after Beatlemania. Other British bands became popular, but the witty wordplay of the Fab Four put them in a class of their own. They were trendsetters. Everyone wanted haircuts like theirs, and everyone wanted to dress like they did. But most important, they were considered by many to be the greatest rock and roll band of all time. Constantly adapting their own music in an extraordinary display of styles and subjects, the Beatles changed music forever. John, Paul, George, and Ringo recorded more than 200 songs together. For decades after, their music would inspire people to sing along, dance, love, remember, cry, think, imagine, and laugh. All right. Well, I've enjoyed learning about the Beatles this week. I hope you have as well. Here's what I need for you to do for me today. I need you to go do second spelling practice to make sure you're ready for your spelling test tomorrow. And then we'll do another grammar review, okay? So go do those 2 things for me now, and we'll see you later.